Have you ever had the feeling that someone was watching you? Not in a casual way like a glance from across the room, but an intense, fixated stare that feels personal and unsettling. I'd heard people talk about experiences like this, but I'd never thought much of it, until I felt it myself. It all started shortly after I moved into my new apartment. My new place was a dream come true. Quiet neighborhood, nice neighbors, and a perfect little space with a huge window that let in sunlight all day. I spent the first few days unpacking, arranging my things, and feeling like life was finally falling into place. I didn't know then that this window, my favorite feature, would soon become the source of my worst nightmares. On the fourth night, as I was organizing my bookshelves, I noticed someone across the alleyway. There, in the window directly opposite mine, was a man. He was standing completely still, staring into my apartment. At first, I thought he might just be looking out, not necessarily at me, but the longer I looked, the clearer it became. His gaze was fixed on me. I shrugged it off, thinking he might just be zoning out or even looking at something else, but something about it felt different. I tried to ignore him and went back to my unpacking. But over the next few days, he was always there, staring, and he never looked away. Every time I glanced over, I'd catch those cold, empty eyes. At this point, I couldn't pretend anymore. It wasn't just casual glances, this man was watching me. It became a routine me trying to go about my day, trying to ignore him, and him just there. Unblinking, unmoving, like he was waiting for something. One night, I decided to close my blinds. It was a shame because that window was the best part of the apartment, but I didn't feel safe with him watching. As I reached for the blinds, I made the mistake of glancing over one last time. His face, expressionless as always, seemed to shift just slightly, like he knew I was about to block his view. And for the first time, he smiled. A thin, unnatural smile that made my stomach twist. After that, I closed the blinds all the time, but that didn't stop the feeling. It was like his eyes were burning through the walls, always on me. I tried to shake it off as paranoia, but every time I relaxed, there'd be a knock, a creak, or something else that pulled me back into that uncomfortable, paranoid state. Then, things escalated. One evening, I came home late from work. It was well past midnight, and I was exhausted. As I stepped into my apartment, I felt a prickling at the back of my neck, a sense that I was being watched. But I had closed the blinds before I left. I looked around, dismissing it as nerves, but the feeling wouldn't go away. Eventually, I went to bed, but I couldn't sleep. At around 2 a.m., I got up to grab some water, and out of habit, glanced towards the window. My heart skipped a beat when I saw a shadow moving outside. It was him, somehow silhouetted behind the blinds. I couldn't see his face, but I knew it was him, standing close, maybe only inches from my window, separated by a thin layer of fabric. I barely slept that night. The next day, I set up a camera to capture footage of my window, hoping I could finally get some proof of what I was experiencing. The following night, I reviewed the footage, and there he was. At 2 a.m., he appeared in the frame, standing at his window, holding something. It was a sign, scrawled with handwriting I couldn't quite make out. I froze, zooming in to get a closer look, and my blood went cold. The sign said, "I see you." I tried to laugh it off as a sick joke, but it didn't feel funny. I couldn't help but wonder, what does he want? I considered reporting it, but to whom? What would I even say? Instead, I tried my best to ignore him, telling myself he couldn't do anything if I stayed inside and kept my doors locked. But soon, even that safety felt thin. 2 nights later, while reviewing the new footage, I noticed something strange. He wasn't alone anymore. Another person was with him, standing just off to the side, out of the window's main view. It was hard to see, but I could make out a shadowy figure, lurking in the corner. I had no idea who this second person was, or why they were both watching. Things took an even darker turn that Friday night. I was winding down for bed when I heard a faint knock on my door. My heart pounded as I slowly approached, but when I looked through the peephole, no one was there. I opened the door just a crack, and there it was. A note, placed carefully on my doormat. It was just 4 words. "You can't hide forever." At this point, I was terrified. The man across the alley was no longer content with just watching me. He had come to my door. I locked every possible entry, closed all the blinds, and tried to sleep, but I lay awake, listening for the faintest sounds. Then, as if things weren't already bad enough, the power went out. It was dead silent. I tried to keep calm, but in that stillness, I heard footsteps echoing from the hallway outside. They were slow, almost methodical, like someone was walking deliberately to each door. I sat there, holding my breath, praying they'd pass, but the footsteps stopped right outside my door. I wanted to scream, but fear kept me silent. Then, the doorknob jiggled, and there was a soft, eerie whisper that said, "Are you hiding?" I could barely move, my mind racing. I held my phone, ready to call for help, but the power came back on, and the footsteps slowly faded down the hallway. The next morning, I went to the building manager, demanding to move or be released from my lease. They were reluctant, but after I showed them the footage and the note, they finally agreed to let me break the lease without penalty. I packed up that day, desperate to get out. As I carried my things to the moving truck, I glanced over at his window one last time. He was there as usual, staring at me with that empty gaze. And this time, he waved. I drove away, and for weeks I felt like I could finally breathe. But sometimes, in the dead of night, I still feel that prickling sensation at the back of my neck. And I can't help but wonder, did I leave him behind, or is he still watching?